Welcome to this short video about William Blake's poem Infant Joy, which was published in 1789 in the Innocents collection before being republished with the Experience collection in 1794. This video is aimed at students studying English literature at A-level, where Blake forms part of their course. This is a relatively short poem, but as is always the case with Blake, there is a degree of ambiguity which operates on a more, I suppose, obscure religious level, which is why in order to understand this poem, we need to understand the ancient custom of baptism or christening, which is why I've included this on this slide. So the summary of the poem, it's only got 2 stanzas, so it's a very short poem, and therefore the summary of it is relatively simple. A mother and her newborn baby are bonding. The child shows happiness, and the mother wishes the child to have joy for its future. The relationship between the mother and the child is also seen as loving, and the mother is also seen as wise and caring. This is of course opposed to other poems in the collection which doesn't present such a harmonious relationship between children and their parents or caregivers. The central construct that Blake uses in this poem is the idea of the name Joy. The baby names itself Joy based on its own understanding of its happy spirit, and the mother is all too eager to allow that to happen, so the mother agrees swiftly that she will therefore call the baby Joy. We need to understand baptism in order to understand what Blake was getting at with this poem. Children in the late 18th century were often baptized on the 3rd day after their birth, and this is also when they would receive a name. To link to Shakespeare here, Shakespeare's birthday is usually accepted as April the 23rd because he was baptized on the 26th. So that's we do a bit of backtracking. So that's why we tend to believe his birthday was St. George's Day, April 23rd. And when a child was baptized, they would receive a name, but of course, only 3 days after birth, the child would not be able to speak yet. The baby would be given the name that somebody else wants to give it. And this alludes to Blake's perhaps very liberal mindset, which is that to give a child a name where it doesn't have any choice about that name is in effect imposing some kind of oppression onto it, some kind of limitation onto it, only 3 days after it has entered the world. So again, we get these themes of oppression, entrapment, limitation coming through, which is often the case with Blake. Here we have the poem. It's only 12 lines long. It has a very lullaby-like or hymn-like quality to it because of the repetition and some of the rhythms. So if we look at the first stanza, the child speaks first. I have no name, I am but 2 days old. So the baby is speaking to the mother, and the baby of course does not have a name yet because it hasn't been baptized. It hasn't got to 3 days old yet when it would often be baptized. So here we could have the biblical association with the book of Genesis and God's creation of heaven, which happened on the 2nd day. The child is happy because it is completely free from the limitations imposed on it by the church or religious ceremony, such as the baptism. But poignantly, it is free for the last time in its life, only 2 days after birth, because on the next day it will receive a name which it did not choose. As we can see in the box there, an infant may be without a name, but it is also without a voice. as the Latin root of the word infant suggests. So again, as is the case with Blake, a lot of the time Blake here is giving a voice to the literally voiceless. The child cannot speak. So this is a kind of a idealistic depiction perhaps of the child's first couple of days where it has learnt to speak already. The mother asks the child what shall she call her baby, so she allows the child to show some self-determination and the freedom to identify itself through its name. The question that I ask students is, do you like your name? And if you don't like your name, is it because of the way it sounds, or is it because somebody else has chosen it for you? And I have had a lot of students over the years who have legally changed their name because they want the ability to choose their own identity and show some freedom in that. So the mother asks, what shall I call thee? And the baby replies, I happy am, joy is my name. So the baby chooses to call itself joy, which of course can be an abstract noun, meaning feeling happy, but it can also be the name of a girl or woman. So it has two meanings there. And it chooses joy because the child believes that this sums up how it feels in its soul. So by naming itself, the child is exercising freedom to determine its own identity rather than having that identity imposed on it by a parent who perhaps represents power and authority. The stanza finishes with the exclamative, sweet joy before thee, which is the mother wishing happiness to the child. And this also suggests that the relationship between the parent and the child is also nurturing and caring, which is at odds with how the relationship is depicted in other poems. As we move into the second stanza, which obviously concludes the poem, we have the semantic field of happiness continuing. We have joy, pretty, sweet, smile, sing, happy. So clearly here, this places the poem within the Songs of Innocence, where you're going to get that kind of register. This is the mother speaking, pretty joy, sweet joy, sweet joy. So the anaphora there reinforces this happy mood. And the repetition of joy clearly places the poem in the Innocence collection and the associations with happiness and love. From Blake's perspective, the baby is a result of the sexual union between loving parents, which Blake viewed as a legitimate expression of love. There is no here sense of sin, suffering, or religious dogmatism, as seen, for example, in The Garden of Love, which is a poem which is about regimented and limitations to sexual freedom. The mother notes that the child is smiling because it has named itself. And again, we have the repetition here of sweet joy before thee, which reinforces this lullaby-like, hymn-like quality of the poem. It has this musicality to it. And again, the mother blesses the child happiness for the rest of its life. Of course, joy is the opposite of sorrow, and that is, of course, a link to the experience version of this poem, which I look at in another video, which is, of course, a very different depiction of perhaps the same infant-parent dynamic. So a short poem, yes, but a poem as well which does have a degree of depth, particularly when you look at the significance of baptism and how Blake is using the name as a symbol of repression, as well as babies not having the ability to choose their own name and other people exercising control over it.